Hello, everybody. It is Emery 48 here, and welcome back to another Food Friday. Today, we're going over something about The Last of Us, a show on HBO that I really enjoyed from start to finish. And Binging with Babish, one of my favorite YouTube channels out there, and definitely my favorite food YouTube channel on the platform, made a video remaking the rabbit dish that was featured in, I believe, episode 3. So I'm very excited to see him remake this.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at Bill's rabbit from The Last of Us. Maybe the best looking plating in all of zombie media history. Now, I realize that cooking with fungus in this context might be borderline upsetting, but one of Bill's 3 preparations did look like it was stuffed with a duxelle, or mushroom pate. Speaking of upsetting, first we have to butcher a rabbit. So if you have any affinity for one of God's more cuddly edibles, you might want to skip to the 2-minute and 30-second mark. First, we have to remove the leg.
We're sticking through this. We're watching the rabbit get chopped
so we're sneaking a knife between
the
zombie
apocalypse. You gotta know how to cook
between them to separate. This tougher, stringier meat is going to get the confit treatment, a method of slow cooking. And
this dish did look really good when it was being made in the show, or when it was being presented in the show. So that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to see this made in real life. Not that that wasn't real life, because it was live action anyway. So kind of the same thing, but it's fine. Subscribe to the channel because we're still watching an ad right now. Thanks. Hope you enjoy.
Tenderizes, flavorizes, and preserves. So once we've got all 4 limbs graphically removed, we need to separate the loins from the rack, which means breaking and separating the spine at the end of the ribs, separating the thin, flat meat from the rib section, making sure to keep it intact.
Kind of looks like a bat
bit
now.
Of it for our stuffed loin, flipping the
Gross.
saddle over meat side up, removing any excess
yeah, that looks like a
tissue,
bat.
and then beginning the arduous and delicate process of deboning. Probably something you didn't come here to learn how to do, so I'm just going to breeze through it. But basically, we're making very careful, shallow cuts around the spine to remove it from the roast. Then perhaps the most delicate.
Didn't realize rabbits look so bat-like.
First, we have to
when
snip
it gets
them off
down
the spine,
like
cut the
the
tops
head
of the
and
ribs
stuff.
to an even height, slice across the bottom of and cut little holes between each rib, scraping the sinew off the bottom of each toothpick-sized bone so that each one can be popped out and freed down to the cut point that we made earlier. All the connective tissue that held the ribs together can then be cut away, revealing the world's most adorable freestanding French rib roast. And so concludes our ambiguous course on miniature butchery. Now we
tiny ribs.
These various cuts for further preparation. The ribs appear to be plainly roasted, so I'm just going to hit them with a little bit of salt and pepper and let them sit in the fridge uncovered for at least an hour and up to overnight. Everybody else is getting the same S&P treatment, but as I mentioned before, the legs and hindquarters are going to get confit. So into a heavy Dutch oven they go, along with a couple sprigs of rosemary and a couple sprigs of thyme, or the survivalist grown herbs of your choice, 3 whole peeled garlic cloves, a tablespoon of whole peppercorns, and 2 bay leaves. Now normally we'd want to confit in some kind of animal fat, like duck fat, and while I'm sure Bill renders his own venison fat or whatever, that's a bridge too far for me, so I'm going with extra virgin olive oil, making sure the rabbit parts are entirely submerged and placing this in a 225-degree Fahrenheit oven for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours until the rabbit is completely tender. Now, so long as it's completely covered in olive oil, it should last in the fridge for a few weeks. Just let it cool to room temperature before refrigerating. Next up, we're taking revenge on that aforementioned fungi, finely chopping about half a pound of hen of the woods mushrooms until it's almost a paste. Also finely chopping 2 smashed cloves of garlic.
I feel like that's going to be something really interesting. Like, would you even bother going out and getting mushrooms? I feel like you'd be a little freaked out about fungus in this world.
A tablespoon of picked fresh thyme leaves, and half a small shallot. Then over on the stovetop, we're going to turn this into the stuffing for our rabbit saddle. First, sauteing the shallot for 2 to 3 minutes. Normally, I would saute the mushrooms first, but there's not much moisture that needs to cook out of hen of the woods mushrooms. So once the shallots are softened, we're going to add the mushrooms and cook for an additional 2 to 3 minutes until everybody's nicely browned. Add the garlic and thyme and cook for an additional 30 seconds or until fragrant. And since Bill clearly knows how to properly raid a liquor store, we're going to deglaze with 2 tablespoons of dry sherry, cooking for another minute or so until all the
survival skill right there.
And allow to cool completely before stuffing our saddle. First, we're going to pack the space between the 2 loins with our duxelle mixture, gently fold it closed like a meaty cigar, cut off all but about ½ inch of the flat meat, which we're going to fold over on itself to secure the log shut. Then using toothpicks or butcher's twine, we're going to seal the seam shut, placing ties at ½ inch intervals. Now likewise, this guy can hang out in the fridge uncovered while we mise our last bit of plus. There was what looked like a carrot puree smeared around the outside of the plate. So for that, I'm going to roast a whole head of garlic that I've cut the top off of, drizzle drizzled with olive oil, sprinkled with salt and pepper, wrapped up tightly in aluminum foil, and roasted at 400 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's
for
pretty
about
simple
40
and
minutes,
sounds
at
really
which point
nice.
Your kitchen will smell awesome, and the garlic cloves will look roasty toasty. Set that aside, rip the tops off with 4 large carrots, retaining the greens for stock or compost. Peel and chop into chunk-sized shapes. Place in a large bowl and drizzle with neutral flavored oil like vegetable or canola. Sprinkle with kosher salt and retrieve a baking sheet from a preheated 400 degree Fahrenheit oven. Dropping the carrots directly onto the hot pan to get a head start on caramelization and browning. Go ahead and roast these guys for 20-25 minutes, giving them a shake halfway until they're nicely browned and tender throughout. Then dump them into an awaiting blender along with
I always get so absorbed in his videos because he does so good
sugar before
at describing what's happening.
Then while the blender's running, we're going to slowly drizzle in
and it's like informative but still fun.
And anywhere from a half to a full cup of chicken stock, just enough so that the carrots can blend to a state of spreadable smoothness. Just make sure it doesn't end up too thin. Oop, I almost forgot our whole head of roasted garlic, which you can squeeze directly in there. And upon tasting, I decided to need a little bit more sweetness, this time in the form of a tablespoon of maple syrup. Once completely smooth, we have our conceptually cruel but thematically perfect carrot puree for our rabbit. There also appeared to be a light salad on the plate, so I'm making a simple French vinaigrette, half a small minced shallot, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 tablespoon red wine vinegar, 1 teaspoon Dijon mustard, a pinch of kosher salt, a few twists of freshly ground black pepper, aggressively tiny whisk to a state of emulsion. Now it's time to...
The tiny whisk is one of the funniest things that he's got because it's like actually kind of helpful, useful, necessary. Be useless to use like a massive whisk for that.
Finally start cooking stuff, so I'm going to remove the confit rabbit legs. Then over on the stovetop, I'm parboiling a big handful of green beans for about 3 minutes, just enough time to cook them crisp and brighten their color. Then I'm going to scoop them out and cool them off completely under running water. Now in stages, depending on their thickness, I'm going to sear the confit rabbit legs, the stuffed saddle, and the miniature rib roasts. Super high heat so they just get a little bit of color so that we can finish them off in the oven. It's a bit of a balancing act because you want all these tiny pieces.
I did not know why that pan was in there. I did not realize the ribs were below it.
Once the rabbit pieces have some good browning, and you're finishing them off in the oven in stages, we can generously re-oil our pan and add the par-cooked green beans and what look like some tricolor cherry tomatoes for a quick char, hopefully with a little bit of fire for added coolness. This shouldn't take more than 1 to 2 minutes. We just want to get some nice dark char marks on the vegetables. Set those aside, and with that, it's time to plate. First, we're lightly dressing our salad of field greens. Make sure you always dress last, right before serving, otherwise the greens will wilt. Retrieve the rabbit pieces from the hot box, and then on a large plate,
does look good.
Add a big chefy smear of our carrot puree. Just because the world's ended doesn't mean that we have to lose our sense of showmanship. Flank that with our light salad, which is going to go very nicely with our confit rabbit leg. Then next to that, we're going to lean our teeny tiny little
I can't say I've had rabbit, but it looks
I find it extremely charming. And then cutting
tasty.
a medallion of our duxelle stuffed rabbit saddle, leaning that precariously against the roast, and flank with our seared green beans and tricolor tomatoes. Finishing with extra salt, pepper, and olive oil if you can spare the resources. And there you have it, Bill's post-apocalyptic rabbit 3 ways. But how's it taste? And the answer was surprising. Rabbit can have an extremely funky, gamey smell when it's raw, but once cooked up, it's almost more akin to dark meat chicken. So the rib roast was cute, if a little bland. The stuffed saddle, especially when dipped in the carrot puree, was really delicious, as you can see by my surprised little fork movement. But the clear winner here was the confit. It was tender, moist, crisp, and imbued with flavor from the garlicky, herby oil, which, just like duck confit, paired excellently with the bitter salad. And the green beans and tomatoes were green beans and tomatoes. But speaking of pairings, I almost forgot the discerning choice for rabbit Beaujolais. This is the same bottle as depicted in the scene, which is perfectly good, especially at its price point, and considering wine had stopped being made 4 years prior. I was only a little disappointed because in a previous scene we saw my man lifting a case of Camus. But overall, this is a light, elegant, romantic little lunch, especially given the world in which it takes place. I'm normally not even that big a fan of rabbit, but I decided to induct this guy into the Clean Plate Club by making it my dinner. Thanks again to Cash.
That was well done. That was cool. Never knew the gaminess about rabbit. Makes sense though, because it is a game animal. That was interesting. I don't think I'd make that because that's a really seems like it would take a long time. Pretty complicated. Deboning a rabbit, not for me. But looked like a good meal. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to react to or anything else you want me to do for Food Fridays down below in the comments. Thank you everybody so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.